Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Karat Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2004 drama movie titled Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Of course, the term Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a line or a stanza from the famous poem by Alexander Pope from, I believe, the poem of Eloise and Abelard, I think was the name of where it came from. Anyhow, the runtime of this movie is 1 hour and 48 minutes long. It is directed by Michel Gondry. It is produced by Steve Golan and Anthony Bergman. The script was written by Charlie Kaufman. It is based off of the story by Charlie Kaufman, Michel Gondry, and Pierre Bismuth. It is composed by John Brion. The cinematography by Ellen Kuris, and it was edited by Valdis Oscarsdottir. And the stars of the movie are Jim Carrey, playing one of his more serious roles. There's no goofy comedy in this one. In fact, Jim Carrey's playing a complete total 180 in this, as he's playing anything but a light-hearted, funny guy. In fact, come to think of it, this movie has a lot of levels of depression in this. The other stars of the movie, rounding out the cast, include Kate Winslet, who I don't know whether she was nominated or if she actually did win an Oscar in her performance in this. Anyhow, she's in this movie. Joining the supporting cast includes Tom Wilkinson, Kirsten Dunst, Elijah Wood, Mark Ruffalo, Jane Addams, David Cross, Deidre O'Connell, Thomas J. Ryan, and Debbon Ayer. I was taken aback by the almost perfect script Charlie Kaufman wrote for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I mean, he really knows more about the human psyche than any of the top therapists in the world. Now, I'm not saying that this movie is a complete psychological study, but it does have a lot of great, rich character development, and you could clearly tell that there are a lot of flaws within the characters, but you know what? That's not a bad thing, because as members of the human race, we all have certain flaws. But we also have these flaws could also be an idiosyncrasy that makes us who we are as an individual. So even though his first collaboration with director Michel Gondry was met with unflattering opinions, their second time around struck gold due to their gaining experience and get a better understanding of building characters and adding dimensions to them. This movie is very character driven, very well developed in terms of characters. Sure, there's a lot of complexities within the characters, but then again, welcome to the human race. We are all very complex individuals. That's what makes us not necessarily flawed, but actually unique. Every scene just seems to weave perfectly, albeit in a non-linear fashion. So this is probably where things might get confusing. But I think that as the narrative flows, there is a lot of symbolism that could help you kind of piece together the scenes together, because let's face it, I mean, you could be taken back to the past, you could be taken back to the present, but there's a certain level of symbolism that kind of like pieces together if this movie was done in a linear fashion. But unfortunately, this movie is non-linear. It jumps from scene to scene. But I think it just simply comes from the color of a certain character's hair, which kind of indicates where we are taken through the narrative. I will get more to that in a bit. When the beach house falls apart, it really brings the house down at the theaters because every shot is handled with the greatest of care. It may look like a simple handheld camera direction featured here, but the scenes play out subliminally in similar veins to that, like Adaptation and Being John Malkovich. The visuals created by Gondry were aimed primarily at himself and are planned out to draw attention, and they are not really intended to be a distraction to take the audience off guard. Sure, there is some CGI that may look awkward, but it was definitely put there for the sake of being comical, like scenes with the boy and Elijah's head turning when he is at the Barnes and Noble, and also borders on a bit of horror-like scenes of the expunged faces in the doctor's residence. Okay, so if you want to know like the main story is okay, Jim Carrey stars as a man named Joel Bartish who lives a pretty ordinary life. He lives in a rather drab setting. He lives in a pretty generic looking apartment, nothing out of the ordinary. He decides to one day uh, fakely call in sick, but it was actually just his intentions of going to Montauk. Montauk is like at the very tip of Long Island, New York. Now, I don't understand why he wanted to take the trip to Montauk, but apparently Joel seems to know what he's doing. Although the audience just can't seem to guess or understand why he would want to go to Montauk. But I know that he is definitely there for a purpose. So, on his way to Montauk, he also runs into a spunky, spontaneous young lady who goes by the name of Clementine, played by Kate Winslet. So they get together, they have themselves a little bit of a conversation. Of course, he's described as this kind of loner type, but he's also a down to earth, level headed, nice guy, non judgmental. And then you have Kay Winslet's character of Clementine. She is definitely more high spirited. She's got a much more livelier personification about her. She definitely has the much more brighter outlook in life, even though it is pretty clear that even she herself even openly admits that she's a very flawed individual. Joel also openly admits that he too is also quite the flawed individual himself. It's definitely the true kind of misery deserves company, but it's just that their personalities are somewhat opposite to each other. They definitely fall in love. They eventually start a relationship. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we come to a certain scene where it's been discovered that he runs into her at a bookstore, but she's definitely doesn't want anything to do with him. Almost like he's not even an afterthought, but a never existent type of individual. And then he's like wondering what happened. So then they go. he gets a recommendation to go to a place called Lacuna, which is a therapy session. To we get an understanding that Kate Winslet's character Clementine went to Lacuna to erase every memory she's had with Joel, and that all the things that they had done together ceases to exist, almost like she just wiped him out of her memory forever. Joel, of course, said that okay, fine. If she wants to erase me out of she wants to erase me out of her memory, I'm gonna go and do the same thing too. So he goes to Lacuna, where he meets the therapist named Howard Mielznik. Okay, I'm not gonna try and try to memorize his name because it's different. We'll just say Dr. Howard. Anyhow, Dr. Howard decides to this says that okay, well, if you want to have your memory erased of her, we'll go ahead and do it. He also hires his technicians, Stan, played by Mark Ruffalo, and Patrick, played by Elijah Wood. They go ahead and erase his memory. While this is happening, he also looks back and remembers that, hey, the relationship I had with Clementine wasn't really all that bad. There were actually a lot of good things that came with my memories. And that maybe some of the good things that he remembered, he doesn't want to completely erase either. And that he thinks that maybe there's a possibility that they could probably get a second chance, and that he feels like, hey, this is not that bad. There are actually some good memories of my relationship with Clementine. And maybe these are just some of these memories he doesn't want taken away. So, he tries to sort of like do this kind of rush against time to try to get back to Clementine's good graces, and to actually stop this program from happening before it's too late. Of course, there's also some subplots involving around Howard and Dr. Howard and his receptionist Mary, played by Kirsten Dunst. Yeah, there's also a bit of some subplot there about them being a little too promiscuous with each other. And yes, they have actually had secret affairs with each other. And it seems like they seem to sort of toy around the idea of having the memories erased just so that they could just genuinely go back to being promiscuous again. So, it's like a back and forth type of thing between Dr. Howard and Mary. And then also, while Joel's memory is being expunged from Clementine's life, Patrick, who was one of the technicians behind the operation, decides to become a bit of an opportunist. So everything that Joel has said and everything that he has done that could have potentially attracted Clementine, Patrick decides to be kind of a bit of a weasel and steal all the quotes that Joel has said to Clementine just so that he could be in a relationship with her. I know he's really not necessarily trying to do this out of spite or opportunity, but maybe because of the fact that Patrick himself is a hopeless romantic and is actually kind of like hetero curious as to what it's like to be in a relationship. Okay, it's just kind of unfortunate that he's taking the stuff in the quotes from Joel just so that he and Clementine could start a relationship at the expense of Joel. Of course, we realize that all of the things that Patrick has said is not naturally the things he would normally say, but these are the words and the quotes from Joel. In other words, he's practically either paraphrasing or completely plagiarizing everything that Joel has said to Clementine that made her attracted to him to begin with. Of course, in the end, she realizes that Patrick is just an opportunistic little weasel and eventually does go back to reconcile with Joel. But there is going to be some adjustments that both she and Joel will have to adjust. I mean, she did say in the end that she will probably eventually become bored of him, and Joel will become very questionable about her motives and about her sanity, which was kind of like the cornerstone as to why they broke up. I mean, eventually she did start to show a bit of a disinterest in him. And Joel also sometimes felt that her rather spontaneous ways might be a bit overwhelming to him. But if they're going to work out a relationship once again, they just have to know and better understand each other. Now, I know this movie is definitely played out as a drama, but I can also see, certain levels of sci-fi because of this whole memory erasing contraption. Like I said, if there is humor, it's very subtle, but it's not actually coming from Joel's character. It's more coming from the Clementine character. And what I said about symbolism of how we could piece together the puzzles, it all comes down to the color hair that Kate Winslet dyes herself over the oncoming months of their relationship. When they first meet, it's spring, it's green, her hair. Yes, she does dye her hair green, which means that it's, the dawning, the beginning of a relationship between her and Joel. And then, and her hair turns red. Red is a symbol of, it's getting hot, it's sizzling. It's summertime and she is just, really, this is where the fire and the heat is starting between the relationship between Clementine and Joel. And then once her hair becomes orange, we start to realize that, something's not going right. Their relationships are starting to slowly fizzle. And then once we get to blue, once her hair becomes blue, it's a sign meaning that it's over. And she is sad and she is depressed. And this is kind of like where the relationship ends. But then, once they start to reconcile, it starts to progressively, slowly turn back to green again. But at least they both have a clear conscience and a clear frame set of mind about who they are and what will be the consequence if they should reconcile. But if they should reconcile, is this going to end with a happily ever after little bow on the end of the package? Not very likely. I mean, just like a lot of relationships, whether it's a boyfriend-girlfriend going steady or husband-wife relationships, there's going to be a lot of speed bumps. there's going to be a lot of resentment and differences in opinions. There's going to be arguing. There's going to be tempers flared. There's going to be, you know, I'm leaving you. I'm sick of you. Well, I feel the same way too. Goodbye, good riddance. Don't trip on the way out. But then they start to work things out, and maybe then they'll once again reconcile till the next time they start arguing with each other. I mean, it's just naturally organic that, just because you're in a relationship doesn't necessarily mean you all necessarily think the same. Because in the end, everyone thinks differently. So this is kind of like what you get in this movie. You don't get a clear happy ending because you don't know whether this relationship is going to have a happy ending. Are they going to actually move forward from their relationship, or are they just going to go through the same shit that they had before? So, this is not one of those 2 and 2 is 4 add up. This is more like you just never know. But that's the beauty of our relationships. It's always going to be a mystery. And I think they want our audience to be in suspense that way so we can have the freedoms and the liberations to draw our own conclusions if whether this relationship between Clementine and Joel is going to last or is it going to fizzle like it did before. And are they going to continue to stop their end of relationship just to restart again so that they can make the same mistakes? Or are they going to move forward from here? There is no clear conclusions, and that's really all I have to say about that. Sure, there are many scenes and subplots from the movie that were handled splendidly, that felt very real and organic, as though they weren't just reading off a script. For example, the awkward relationship between Kirsten Dunst's character, Mary Svevo, and her colleague, Dr. Howard Miarzwiak, played by Tom Wilkinson, and how he wanted to conceal their relationship by erasing her from his mind. I mean, yes, it was another one of those receptionist, healthcare professional relationship cliche. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Howard is a married man and has kids, and he's been in a relationship with his receptionist. But they still managed to keep tapes and archives stashed away. But it just feels so natural in their delivery that they want to hide the relationship, especially from his wife. But the fact of the matter is that the more they want to erase things from their mind, this just gives them more opportunity to just continue being promiscuous with each other. Even though it's not actually Howard that wants to be promiscuous, it's more or less Kirsten Dunst's character, Mary, that seems to be more into him. I don't know if it's because she kind of has a bit of that father type thing going for her because of the fact that she is like pretty much in her 20s and this guy is like probably in his 50s, and that she probably prefers the whole likings of the older men type of thing, which kind of makes her feel kind of like clingy to older people, to older men, because it makes her kind of feel like it keeps the girl instincts into her. I don't know, but it does feel real and organic in in that kind of perspective. Another more prominent scene that works so organically real is Patrick Wirtz's character, played by Elijah Wood, stepping up to take the opportunity to experience love and the baggage that comes when he tries to form a relationship with Clementine Krasinski, which is, of course, Kate Winslet. Patrick, of course, is a young man in his early 20s who probably never experienced love, but he also wanted to get his taste of it. But I guess since he's kind of a hopeless romantic, the choice he had was to try and see if what it would be like to fall in love. And since, Clementine is kind of a broken up individual, he tries to win her charm by stealing the ideas and thoughts from Joel. I don't think it was his intentions to be a creep, but it then eventually ends up with him actually becoming one. Not that he felt he was a better boyfriend to Clem than Joel Barish, but to get a better understanding of what it's like to be in love, something that he has never felt before. An interesting thing about this movie is that the residences of each of the characters symbolize the person of who they are. Like, for example, as I mentioned before, Joel's apartment stands out as being extremely mundane and moody, which is symbolic to the fact that a lot of memories he's had of Clem are gone, and that the memories he had with her are ones he would have liked to keep, both good or bad. I mean, the situations between him and her could have easily been resolved without necessarily having them break up. And maybe that's kind of like what he had experienced himself. Like why did this happen? If there's anyone who understands the artistic merit behind pain and regret, it is from the script of Charlie Kaufman. We as humans can learn from our errors in life and how we can take these errors and either go the easy way like Clem and move forward with our life and forget about our past. I mean, we could try and do that. That would be the easy way out. Or we could just keep things in our past, look into the present for a solution, and try to hope for the future ahead like Joel did. Sure, in the end, Clem and Joel are back together again and have rekindled their relationship. They seem to be made for each other because of the cliched and very real opposites attract alibi. And yes, they are two completely different people. But in the end, they're the same because they're both flawed and because they were meant for each other. And sure, their relationship is rekindled. We know that they're not the perfect couple, and we don't expect it that way. I'm sure that if you read fairy tale stories, a lot of them are just because they say they lived happily ever after. Does it actually guarantee, or is it written in stone, that their relationships are going to be happily ever after? Not really. Sure, they will fight, they might lose their tempers, but one thing guaranteed, they will find themselves back into each other's arms once again, or they might even drift apart again. To get a better understanding about the relationship between Joel and Clem is to have experienced what they've been through, and you have to kind of live in the shoes of both the leading characters. There are plenty of people like Joel who will find true love to someone who's spontaneous and free spirited, but sadly will want to move forward and find someone else due to their boredom with the Joel in her life and would like to start a new slate in her life while throwing away the life that she once knew. You know, Sure, an unexpected breakup can be painful and upsetting, but it's worth it because it has the feeling of adventure in making the effort to fall in love with someone who will love you at first and then unexpectedly erase you from your memory. But I think the thing is that even if a relationship does break up, there are times when you just have to look back at the memories you've had with each other, through good or through bad, and hopes to move forward for either reconciliation or not to just completely wipe them out of their lives forever. The good side of love and the bad part of love is equally divided, for the feeling of love gives you the feeling that you do exist in this world, and to counteract that claim, we know that the emotional hurt is there, especially when the breakup isn't comes around. But it was worth it because at least these two individuals experimented with love, and at least they had a chance to have that feeling of it. I guess it's better to be loved once than to not be loved at all. It's better to experience love rather than stir away from it as a whole. And I think that's kind of like what the message you get here in this movie. And I think it does actually work out very, very well. And I highly recommend people to see this movie. It's complex, it's difficult, but it's very rich in character development, and it gives you a better understanding of what love is like. And even though it's not always flattering and it's not always compromising, it's still effective, and it's something that we can all either look forward to in terms of the good memories and not look forward to in terms of the bad memories. So, when all is said and done, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind a 9. So, I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.